Welcome to the UNFPA Virtual Careers Clinic. Now, my task today is to give a presentation on about how to manage a career holistically. And the one thing I'll say at the start is that I wish I'd had this presentation about 20 years ago when I started my own career, because I probably would have had a much sort of smoother run, if you like, in my own career. So I'm going to touch on the various things that as young professionals you need to think about when thinking about career choices and decisions. Now, the first one is qualifications. I know many of you that are watching this are probably doing your master's degrees or the equivalents. The one thing I'll say that is in the multilateral sector generally, the minimum standard really is now a master's degree. If you haven't got a master's degree, you're probably not going to get past first base. So it's important that you do get that qualification. It's not an absolute, and there are still some organisations that will recruit you without the master's degree, but it really is important because that's what you're competing against. I can tell you now there are tens of thousands of graduate students being churned out of very good universities every year with these qualifications. So that's who you're competing against in the global market. The second element that you need to think about is the documents that you're applying for jobs with. So it's not just good enough anymore just to have one resume or one CV. Each organisation that you're applying with, particularly in the multilateral sector, is wanting a specific type of application. So given that you're competing against other people, the advice I have for you is give them the type of documents that they're looking for. The UN, for example, they want what's called a PHF, a personal history form. Sometimes it's called a P11, a personal history profile. Sometimes they want an achievement-oriented CV. So give them what they're looking for. A little piece of advice, though, is that many organisations are now better leveraging eRecruit. And one of the functionalities that is available in eRecruit is that you can do keyword searches. Now let me give you an example of this. A few years back I did one when I was working with peacekeeping, and we had a training officer position. And we put in 5 keywords: training, learning, capacity building, career development and education. And we pressed the button and we went from over 700 applications to less than 200 applications. And that means that, you know, a good number of applications had none of those words in there, which means they probably weren't suitable for a training officer position. So you need to be clever about weaving in the appropriate competencies and the appropriate terminology into your applications. Now, the third element is critical, and this is and I really want to emphasize this one, and that's the element of networking. Now, often when I'm talking to a very diverse group like I am virtually now, when you start talking about networking, there's this sort of collective, networking. And there's this misconception that networking is kind of a North American concept. You know, take the boss out for lunch, offer to pay the bill, slip the CV across at the same time. No, that's not networking. And one thing I'll say about networking, every society, every culture that has ever existed has had formal and informal mechanisms for networking. In fact, it's described as building long-term, professional, reciprocal, that's the key word, reciprocal relationships where you're sharing knowledge, resources and information. Now, why is it important? Well, in the multilateral sector, 90% of jobs, that's 90% of jobs, are secured through some form of formal or informal networking. And that's actually very similar to other sectors as well, the public sector, the private sector, the military sector, etc. Now, when we talk about networkers, we tend to talk about this 3 tiers of networkers. Tier 3, which is about 70% of people, are what we call passive networkers. These are people that come to work, do their job, they log in, they do a nice job, they go for a 1-hour lunch, they come back and they leave at 5 o'clock and they do a good job, no problem. But they tend to get stuck in career ruts or career plateaus. They don't tend to move. Tier 2 are what we call active networkers. It's about 25-28% of staff. And these are people that set up the Christmas decorations. When the new staff member comes in, they take them under their wing and show them around the office. These are people that remember birthdays and go and buy a birthday cake. These are people that when there's a crisis in the office, they stay late and they work. They volunteer to take minutes in meetings. And they put a lot more into an organisation than they take out of an organisation. And these people do well. They move quickly in their careers. And Tier 1, which is about 2 or 3% of people, are what we call creative networkers. And these are people that actually create networks of people. They move an agenda forward. They set up NGOs. They set up think tanks, roundtables, conferences. They galvanise support and generate resources behind an idea and get things done. And these people move very quickly in organisations. So I guess one question I have for you watching this is, where do you fit into that paradigm? Are you a passive, active or creative networker? And certainly while you're young in your career, if you're not in those top 2 tiers, then I think you're doing your career a disservice. And please, if you're not paying enough attention to networking, then you're probably doing your career a disservice. Now, a couple of things about networking. Firstly, and this is a piece of advice that was given to me many years ago, it's always harder to say no to somebody that you've met. Okay, we live in an age now where we're sending text messages and tweets and emails all over the world, and often we're doing that to try and find jobs, etc. But don't lose sight of the personal touch. Okay, if you get the opportunity to have a job interview and they want to do it over the phone, suggest that you go there and do it in person. You're much more likely to get the job in a face-to-face interaction than over a telephone. The second thing is, and this is probably a very bad piece of advice, but I'll give it to you anyway, is as recruiters, we don't actually look at the grades that you got at university, generally. We just look at the fact that you actually passed the degree. And so what I would say is probably put down the books and pick up a glass of wine or a cup of tea and go out and have a chat with somebody, because you're much more likely to find out about job opportunities and to build networks by doing that socially than by getting good grades. Okay, it's still important to get good grades, sure, but invest in those sort of that social interaction, if you like. Okay, now very closely linked to networking is the fourth component, which every one of you watching this already has, and that is a reputation. All of you have a reputation. Some of them good, some of them not so good. It just depends. Now, why is that important? The way that other people perceive you is vital in your career. How other people see you. Now, your reputation is not what you think other people think about you. It's actually what other people think about you. So if you ask me, do your staff like you, Michael? I say, yeah, they love me. They think I'm the right-hand side of Jesus. You know. If you ask my staff, they say, no, he's a disaster. He's terrible. You know. So often we have a very distorted view of how other people see us. And the way that people see us is a tremendously powerful career driver. Usually it's a one-liner. Yep, great person. I'd love to have him on my team. Writes well, very analytical. Or, no, she's a disaster, always ruins every team that she goes into. And every one of us watching this has a one-liner associated with us, probably several one-liners associated with us. And I know that from doing reference checks on people. You pick up the phone, you say, okay, what's this person really like? I remember one in particular where somebody said to me, look, he's great, he really knows his area, but when he gets angry, he throws telephones at people. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's actually an anger management issue. So managing your reputation is very important, particularly when you're young and new in an organisation. So a couple of pieces of advice on reputation management. First one, be acutely aware of how you use email. I often say to people, never send an angry email. Save as a draft, close the computer down, go home, have a sleep, look at it with fresh eyes in the morning, because that email can come back and haunt you years later. The second thing is, with reputation management, is be acutely aware of how you're using social networking sites. A lot of organisations now are asking for access to your LinkedIn page or your Facebook, etc., and they want to see who you're friends with, who you're talking with, what sort of things you're putting on there. And be aware of other sort of simple things as well. I was in Australia, my home country, last year, and I heard something on the radio which absolutely shocked me, and that is that 1 in 5 Australian women have sent a nude photograph of themselves either on a telephone or over the internet. Now that's staggering. That's staggering from a reputational management point of view. And I was shocked at that because I thought, for 2 reasons actually. I thought, firstly, I have never received one, which I thought, I might have if it was a 1 in 5. And the second thing is that these images can be used to come back and haunt people for the rest of their career. So be acutely aware of stuff like that. Exposed tattoos and piercings. Remember that the people that are interviewing you and are making decisions on jobs may not have the same sort of understanding of those social and cultural norms that you have. So be aware of that. The next aspect is the aspect of competencies. Now, if you want to have a significant comparative advantage over other people that you're competing with, you really do need to understand what a competency is. Most people can vaguely talk about competencies, but they don't really understand how they fit in as a bedrock into human resources management. Understand how they fit into job design, job analysis, job classification, job interviewing, and performance management. If you have a broader understanding of competencies, you will have a much more competitive edge over the people that you're going for jobs against. The other thing about competencies is that often younger professionals tend to put down a series of jobs or internships that they've had on their resume. Rather than seeing yourself as a series of jobs, look at yourself as a competency profile. Good development professional with capacity in analysis, research, and project management or something like that. So look at yourself as a competency package rather than as a series of jobs. The next component is looking at what I call job satisfiers. And these are essentially, a job satisfier is something that makes you happy when you come to work. Now, each of you watching this will probably have had some paid employment, and some would have been a better experience than others. And try to think about what it is that the ones where you really enjoyed working, what were the ingredients that made you happy when you came to work? Okay, now, from a broader career perspective, what we try to advocate is that if you have an understanding of what it is that makes you happy when you come to work, you should try to align your job choices to what your job satisfiers are. So if you're the sort of person who really likes to interact with people and work in teams and problem solve, probably working on independent consulting is not for you. If you want the sort of person who really wants to be in the field at the forefront of what's happening in international development or global development, perhaps a job at headquarters is not for you. So just think about what it is that actually makes you happy when you come to work. Now, similarly but differently is the next one, which is your value system. Now again, this is something that every one of you watching this has one. You all have a unique value system. And these are the things that you're passionate about, that makes you tick, that you get fired up about. Try to work out what it is that, what your intrinsic values are, and how your career choices can be aligned to these intrinsic values. One question I often ask in interviews is a very simple one. I say, what are the 3 values that are most important to you, and how do these values translate into your work? And regardless of who I ask this question to, often people are stumped by this. And it's not because they don't have a value system, it's because they've never really thought about it. So that's a little piece of homework for you to do tonight. Go home and think about that question. What are the 3 values that are most important to me, and how do these translate into my work? And again, try to align your value system with your career choices. The next component is what I call opportunity scans. Now, the world of work is fundamentally changing. It is changing at an incredibly rapid pace. And there are new opportunities emerging all the time, and there are old opportunities or functions and jobs that are becoming obsolete as we speak. I remember when I first joined the UN, there was a lot of people working in a job called radio operator. That doesn't exist anymore. There was nobody working in website development because there weren't websites when I joined the UN. So you think about that. How many people do you know that actually owned a mobile telephone 20 years ago? Probably very few, and yet I bet every single one of you now watching this has a mobile phone and you're connected to the web with that mobile technology. So there are new opportunities arising all the time. Now what you need to do is think about, what do I have in my professional armoury that makes me employable? And if I'm not getting the jobs that I'm going for, why not? What's missing from my professional armoury? So think about what's on the horizon. Where are the jobs coming in the next 3 to 5 years? There's a little piece of advice here. There's a saying called follow the money. Now that doesn't mean go for big dollars when you're looking for jobs. It means where money is flowing, generally there's jobs. Okay, so you look at the geographic area where money is flowing. At the moment it happens to be the Middle East with the Arab Spring. There's a lot of money flowing into the Middle East. But also look at the thematic areas where money is flowing. There's still a lot of money flowing into HIV/AIDS prevention, into the environment and other sectors. So think about where money's flowing both thematically and geographically, and where you may have an entry point. Now the next thing I want to talk about is what we call emotional intelligence, or EQ. Now this is an interesting one because when it comes down to the last sort of 4 or 5 people that you're looking at for a job, we make an assumption, either through technical testing or through other forms of interviewing, that you can technically do the job. When it comes to the interview though, what we're looking for is your emotional competencies. How aware are you? How aware are you of how you're personality coded, how you're culturally coded, and how that may impact on a team? How do you influence people to action? How do you navigate conflict in a team? Because you can be technically very good at an area, but if you're a disaster in a team, we're not going to recruit you. Okay, so again, another piece of advice I'd have for you is do some reading on emotional intelligence and really look at what it is that makes people successful. And often it's not about IQ, it's about average IQ matched with strong EQ. Often that's the key ingredient for success. The next thing I'll talk about is momentum. Now, probably the reason you're watching this is because you're curious about careers in the multilateral sector and in UNFPA in particular. Now, my advice to young people is they have to start building momentum if they want to access a particular organisation or to change jobs, etc. And that requires something coming from inside of you. You have to build that momentum. You can't sort of rely on your parents or your mates to say, oh, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. No, that has to come from within. And often you have to be systematic about it. You have to be systematically looking at the jobs websites of the organisations that you want to access. You have to start building those professional networks that I was talking about previously. You have to start managing their reputation. You have to start identifying the competencies and the job satisfiers and the values and the opportunity scans. And that requires you to have some sort of momentum. Many of you will already have experience with this. Probably when you chose your universities, you did all the research and made the phone calls and wrote the letters, etc. And that was the sort of momentum for you getting into grad school. The same thing is true of jobs. You have to build that momentum. And sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes a year. But what you find is once you start building that momentum, then things will start working for you. But it has to come from within you. The final element I want to talk about is luck. Now, you're probably all smiling here and saying, well, of course you need to be lucky to get a job. That's actually not the case. And I want to use Oprah's definition of luck. And her definition is, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Okay. And what I'll argue very, very strongly is that if you're dealing with all of these different elements of your career holistically, and you're really paying attention to them, what you're doing is you're creating the conditions for luck to happen for you. Okay? You're getting prepared, and then when the opportunity arises, you're best positioned to take that opportunity. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I think hopefully you've got a few points that you can think about to improve the way that you're approaching your career. And on behalf of UNFPA, I'd like to say thank you very much, and good luck.